It's time now for today's edition of Media Watch, and I'm joined by Emma James. Hello, Emma.
Hi there.
Now, an interview with the French president has caused a bit of controversy, and it hasn't even been published yet.
Yes, you might not think it's all that unusual for Emmanuel Macron to be gracing the cover of a French weekly magazine, because after all it's not, but it is the actual magazine that is causing the furore. Valeurs Actuelles, which is deemed by many to be a far-right magazine, is out tomorrow. The magazine says it's taken 2 years of negotiating to get hold of this particular interview with Emmanuel Macron, which was done last week. We don't yet know the full contents of what he's told them, but we do know it's going to be 12 pages in length. He will address immigration, national identity, Islam, and the thorny issue for France of women wearing the veil. The headline here says, the failure of our model is combined with the crisis in Islam. So lots of very contentious issues to be addressed, and in a magazine that people deem to be far right, many are not happy. Now, Valeurs Actuelles seem to be rather reveling in the idea that people are talking about them. They've done this article on their website saying that the left is choking, basically on its own irritation and anger that Valeurs Actuelles has managed to secure this interview. This is a tweet from a spokesperson for the Communist Party. He's renamed the magazine Dustbin Values, saying that 3 days after the attack on a mosque in Bayonne, it is a spitting in the face of those subjected to hate every day. I should point out the interview was done last week, so before that attack happened. So it's perhaps unfair to criticise on the basis of something that happened after the interview was carried out, but prior to publication. This gentleman, who is a spokesperson for Unsubmissive France, another left-leaning party here in France, this is no longer trying to solicit votes from the far right. This is complicity with them. And it's not just those working in politics who are angry about this. This gentleman says it's shameful. This rag to speak out. We can no longer say anything about Donald Trump. Well, this woman points out that this magazine, which some people might say is just very, very right-leaning rather than far-right, but it was actually convicted, found guilty of inciting racial hatred back in 2015. Now, this is the edition that got them in trouble. It says the overdose of the Roma people, basically. The French have had enough. So you get an idea of the kind of content that would have been in that magazine. So they were convicted just 4 years ago for that one. And it was far from an isolated incident. The Huffington Post, the French edition, looking at some of the front pages that we've seen from Valeurs Actuelles over the years, the veil or France, Islam, immigration, terrorism, the big blindness, they call it. And a lot of these really don't need a lot of translating, frankly, to get an idea of what it is that they're saying. Now, Emmanuel Macron has said that he is the president of everyone, and this is an opportunity to reach a different audience than if he gave an interview to one of the more traditional newspapers, perhaps. You can argue the merits and the ethics of that choice. Now, what is interesting, though, is that Valeurs Actuelles have tweeted this, saying that Emmanuel Macron told them it's a very good paper and you have to read it to understand how the right is thinking.
Okay, so that's the president's defence for speaking to that publication. And you mentioned even in that lead-in that the Muslim headscarf is often a subject of debate here in France, and it's back on everybody's radar once again because of something that Charlie Hebdo, the satirical newspaper, has put out on one of its front covers, causing a lot of anguish and anger as well.
Yes, no great surprise there with Charlie Hebdo. The veil very much the talking point of France once again. This after the Senate actually voted to ban it from being worn by people accompanying children on school trips. Now, that was debated earlier this week. Not necessarily the finest moment in French politics, because one French senator actually compared women wearing veils to Halloween witches. So a lot of people really quite disgusted by that comparison, unsurprisingly. Now, Charlie Hebdo have focused on a statement that came from the French president last week. It surprised some. He said that the wearing of the veil in public places is none of his business. So this is their little animated drawing, which goes along with the cover of the new issue. And you'll notice instead of La République en marche, which is the name of Emmanuel Emmanuel Macron's party, we've got Islamic Republic on the move in the background there. And a lot of people very much taking that at face value, interpreting it as a far right, basically, essentially, criticism of modern day France and criticism of Muslims. Now, this Twitter user says that it's actually made him very angry. He regrets the fact that he went out screaming in the street just for Charlie Hebdo to now become a far right rag, as he calls it. And it's interesting that someone who presumably is familiar with their work and humour, whether you like their humour or not, has actually assumed that that is an anti-Islamic sentiment. This is the cover again. It does beg the question, if you need to be that careful with the interpretation of it, should there be something a little bit more explanatory within it? Their idea is that this is how the far right sees Emmanuel Macron, essentially shrugging his shoulders while believing that his country is basically France is being taken over by veil-wearing Muslims. It's rather convoluted and difficult to understand. Nawak, who is a very well-known cartoonist here in France, has tweeted about this, though, saying that the comments about this front page basically confirm what many cartoonists have been saying here in France for many years, that you publish on Twitter and you risk exposing your work to those who don't know how to read it or who deliberately twist its meaning. So yes, interesting times. Charlie Hebdo once again claiming to be misunderstood, but certainly fanning the flames of controversy.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that edition of Media Watch. Emma James, thank you so much.